students, welcome to my class. Today we are going to begin with Emily Dickinson, the American poet. The American poet Emily Dickinson belongs to 19th century. Though she belonged to 19th century, but in her poetry we witness a very rare quality of feminist poetry. The feminist movement in 20th century gradually appreciated Dickinson's poetry, which was actually published after the death of the poet. During her lifetime, only few poems were published in a very limited manner, but after her death, all her poems, around 1800 poems, were published in different volumes. And gradually people noticed some queer, essential qualities in Emily Dickinson's poetry. And in her poetry, we find as it reflects her own life, because if you study about her life, you will find that she led an isolated life. It was a self-exile. It was self-imposed exile that she lived in most part of her matured life. And towards the very end of her life, she was almost out of the people's interaction except poetry. But in her poetry, we find those very qualities which the critics and scholars identify with typical feminist expression, like simplicity of diction, simple and continuous stanzaic form, and the themes mostly deal with very ordinary incidents of life which generally we do not notice, but she has made out of these very ordinary incidents, ordinary encounters of life into most significant poems, which brings about the mystery, the religious aspect, the spirituality, and so on and so forth. In her poetry, another important aspect is that her titles are also very, very insignificant from the conventional point of view, because they are taken just out of the lines within the poem, which are expressing a very simple idea or a simple emotion. And her poetry is mostly written in the unconventional capitalization and punctuations. Lots of dashes we will find in her poems, which suggests a sense of continuity, which is a speech of a woman. A woman rarely uses a full stop, a decisive break. There is a sense of continuity. So that sense of continuity is carried out through these dashes and other punctuation marks, which gives the whole poem a sense of innocent, informal expression of deeper emotions and feelings. And also we can notice in her poetry some idiosyncratic vocabulary and imagery. She uses a lot of common imageries, very insignificant imageries of everyday life, means the things in the kitchen or the things in her garden, very ordinary creatures, very ordinary flowers and all that. They are used in such simple way, but still they carry very powerful suggestiveness. Simple flowers, but she converts them into very powerful carriers of emotion and passion. And she generally produced her poetry in balladic stanza of 4 lines of alternative rhyming scheme of A, B, C, B, but she did not use the pentameter. She used mostly the trimeter or tetrameter, and even in the second and fourth line she uses slanting rhythm to give a sort of speed, a sort of hurriedness into her feelings that she is trying to convey to the reader. And her poems are mostly obsessed with death, immortality, but nature occupies one of the most another important part of her poetic work. But it is not the nature of a very grand scale, but it is the nature around the common life. Dickinson, in her poetic career, was highly impressed by Wordsworth, Emerson, Blake, and to a great extent Longfellow. But at the same time, she was also a student of Shakespeare because she wanted to gain as much knowledge as possible, which she can express in a very condensed manner like the master dramatist and poet. So, in all total, if we see that Emily Dickinson emerges in 20th century as one of the most significant American poet who is as contemporary as any of the poets of 20th century. So today we are going to look at one of her nature poems, that is, A Bird Came Down the Walk. A bird came down the walk, he didn't know I saw, he beat an angleworm in halves and ate the fellow raw. So the poet, as I told you, that she was living mostly in self-exile within her home, and she occasionally ventured out to her garden. So in one such venturing, she came across a bird. There is no specification of the bird. Why? Because it is a very ordinary or familiar bird. It is a small bird. So, a bird, but the bird B is capital for the purpose is that the bird is an important guest in the life of the poet, because the poet was living alienated, alone, self-exiled. She imposed it on herself, not because of any sad things or other things, but she gradually found herself to be separated from the human interaction because she thought that life can be properly realized through isolation. So the bird, though it is an ordinary bird, it is a very familiar bird, but it is an important guest in her life. Therefore, the B is capital. The bird came down the walk, and the W is also capital. Look at the interesting thing. Why the walk is important? Because she was also taking up the walks very rarely. For her, the walk in the garden was one of the most important act of her life, because she was confined within her home. So her walking was just like a sense of liberation, a sense of mixing and mingling with the nature as well as the outer world. So a bird came down the walk. That means a stranger, a guest who came into her life when she was out to embrace the life there in the nature. So the bird, to her, to the poetess, is a most welcome agent, a welcome spirit. He didn't know I saw, but the bird didn't see the poet. The bird was busy in its own world, and the poetess was observing. So the bird was not intruding, and for the bird she is using he. We don't know whether Emily was aware that the bird was a male bird, but why she is calling it a he bird? Maybe it is the desire, the longing of the poetess to be loved by someone. So the bird comes here, the bird is being personified as a lover or as a gazer, if not a lover, as a gazer, a male who comes to watch a female on the walk. So he didn't know I saw. The bird may be looking at the poet, but the poet is not giving any indication that she is looking at the bird. So look at this line. It very sensibly bringing out the feelings of a girl or a woman who is coming to the outer world and is being watched by the male gaze, which she likes, and at the same time she wants to avoid directly. He beat an angle worm in halves, and then the bird who had been made into a male personification is now being converted into a macho. He emerges as a powerful, heroic personality. He beat an angleworm. The angleworm is capital, as if the worm is an entity who is powerful. But the bird ate the angleworm in halves, just cut it into 2 pieces and ate it. It emerges like a hero. The bird becomes the hero in the life of the poet who is taking a walk. The bird is as if trying to impress the poet and ate the fellow raw. And the bird ate the fellow, that angleworm, raw. So it indicates 2 things. At the same time, it suggests the nature that Wordsworth said, that it is rayed in tooth and claw, that nature is full of that violence. But at the same time, it also suggests for the poet as if the bird is a male, a macho male who is trying to impress her. by making the angelworm divide into two and eating it raw. She is highly impressed by the act of the bird. And then he drank a dew from a convenient grass. And after eating that after eating that worm raw, the bird is also drinking the dew from a convenient grass. Convenient, why? Because the leaves of the grass was conveniently situated, and the bird picked up that drop of dew from the blades of the grass, drank, suggesting not only convenience and comfort, but also the harmony with nature, and as if it is trying to impress the poet, and then hopped sideways to the wall to let a beetle pass. And then it jumped again and again to the wall, towards the wall of the garden. Why? To let the beetle pass. A beetle passed. So the bird, which was an epitome of grand power, suddenly becomes afraid of the beetle and its sound. It must have some experience of the beetle. So it immediately knows that the danger is coming. So it hopped away. So look at the beauty of the poem. The poem is presenting the binary of nature. That in nature, everything, every creature is both powerful and powerless. It is powerful for its prey, but it is powerless before its preyer. He glanced with rapid eyes, and now the bird is frightened, and it is glancing with rapid eyes, rapid movement of its eyes that hurried all abroad, as if the eyeballs are in hurry. They are moving rapidly. Why? Because it is now aware of the danger, the enemies. So it is taking a stock of the situation by hurriedly moving its eyeballs. They looked like frightened beads, I thought. And the poet is now thinking that heroic bird who was emerging as an image of a great hero is now transforming into a creature of fear and nervousness. Its eyeballs are looking like frightened beads, like the beads which are frightened. They are shrunken and moving, rolling within its eye. I thought, that is the thought of the poet. The poet is thinking. He stirred his velvet head, and the bird stirred, moved its velvet head. Its head is velvety. It is so beautiful to the poet. The poet is appreciating the beauty of the bird and its velvety head. But the head is being nodded, being moved by the bird. That means the bird is accepting, acknowledging that nature, life is full of risks as well as the sustenance. Nature gives us sustenance, but at the same time nature also frightens us, because it is a long chain of the prey and the preyer. Like one in danger cautious, I offered him a crumb. So now the poet is having sympathy, or is feeling sympathetic to the the bird, because the bird is now nervous, apprehensive. So the poet is trying to break its nervousness, break its apprehensiveness, to bring it into the normalcy. So she is offering a crumb of the bread. She is throwing away a crumb of the bread towards the bird, so that the bird can be normalized. The bird will find the food, and again when it will take the food, it will feel normalized, it will feel confident. And he unrolled his feathers and rode him scepter home. But the bird didn't accept the crumb. As soon as the crumb was thrown towards it, it probably felt more apprehensive. It probably felt more afraid of the poet, who is a big creature than the beetle. So it immediately unrolled its feathers. It opened up its feathers and rode him scepter home, and the feathers carried it towards its home. Mark the line, rode him scepter home. So the bird is not moving towards its home. Its feathers are taking it towards the home. That means the bird is so terrified, the bird is so apprehensive, that it simply opened its feathers, and it doesn't have its power to be carried away, but the feathers are carrying it away. And the poet is also discovering within the bird that apprehensive lover who is withdrawing with reluctance due to the fear, due to the unexpectedness of life, unexpected future. As if the bird is withdrawing because it is not sure what is going to happen with it. Then oars divide the ocean, two silver for a seam. And now the poet is describing, appreciating the smooth flight of the bird in the air. The bird is very smoothly gliding in the air. How it is gliding? Oars divide the ocean, as if it is moving like a big ship in the ocean, in the deep ocean, where the oars are dividing the water to make the ship move or glide majestically, gracefully. The bird is flying in a graceful manner. And there is also an allusion to the mythical travel, the mythical journey in the sea of Ulysses. That Ulysses, the Trojan hero, after coming back to his homeland after so many years in the Trojan War, again he moves out in search of knowledge, in search of the excitement of life in the vast ocean. So the bird is moving like that. The bird is moving like a soul searching for knowledge, the ultimate knowledge of life. So the oars divide the ocean, two silver for a seam, and the sky is too silver to light it. For a seam, it is a seamless movement. It is moving, it is gliding so smoothly. Or butterflies of banks of noon leap pulseless as they swim. But when the bird was moving smoothly in the air, the butterflies which are there on the ground, which were also moving, but they are not moving like the bird so gracefully. The butterflies are moving with their restless movement of banks of noon. It is the noon time. When the noon approaches, the butterflies move, fluttering their wings towards the shade, towards the shady groups, plassless as they swim. And the butterflies, how they are moving? As if they are leaping into the water. It is a comparison with the bird. The bird is moving like a ship moving with its oars in the ocean. But the butterflies are moving as if they are leaping and plassless as they swim. They are swimming, they are also swimming in the same water, means the same air, plassless. But there is a difference that the bird is uniting itself with the nature, and the butterflies, they are also uniting with the nature, but in different modes, in different manners. So the poet is appreciating the nature, the varieties of nature, like Wordsworth, like other poets, like Blake and others. She is appreciating the nature, she is appreciating these tiny creatures. So the bird is moving away due to its pure survival instinct, and the poem very beautifully presents the gap between human world and the world of nature, or the world of the bird and the butterflies. So this is a poem of rare originality and distinctive quality of Emily Dickinson, that in a very seamless manner explores the individuality, variety and the conformity to the order of life, to the way of life. So this poem, we can find some of the discussions if you like. You can go through Critical Companion to Emily Dickinson by Sharon Later, or The Thematic Patterns of Emily Dickinson's Poetry by Niru Tandon and Anjana Trivedi, or Emily Dickinson, Woman Poet, Pamela Bennett. These books will be very helpful to you for critically understanding the poem and appreciating the poet and situating her in the modern and postmodern time of feminine movement. The true feminist, an essential feminist, we can say Emily Dickinson is appropriating the wholeness of living experience. So questions can be asked from this poem about Emily Dickinson as a poet, or Emily Dickinson's appreciation of the nature around her, which is certainly different from the other nature poets. Therefore, I hope you will study it thoroughly and we can have further discussions on it if necessary. Thank you.